40 years ago, we lost Phil Lynott, the heart and soul of Thin Lizzy. And yet, even today, 40 years later, one of the strangest stories tied to his legacy is still making the rounds.
Joke.
So today, let's discuss how up-and-coming Def Leppard have accidentally killed their favorite band Thin Lizzy back in the 80s, and a bit more. Here you go. As always, guys, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of our Metal Pilgrim channel is, of course, to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it. The road through the rock and metal world sometimes takes rather strange turns, and one of the strangest ones leads us all the way back to the early 1980s, when the young and upcoming band from Sheffield, Def Leppard, ended up playing a pivotal role in the final chapter of Thin Lizzy. And the craziest thing about it is that Def Leppard weren't really their rivals. Quite the opposite. They were their fans. Massive ones. As we all know, Def Leppard have never been comfortable being labeled a new wave of British heavy metal band. But just like many other bands of that scene, they were deeply influenced by Thin Lizzy. Elliott has said many times that when the band was just starting out, they played a lot of Lizzy covers, including Rosalie, Jailbreak, and especially Emerald. And the craziest thing is that it was actually the very specific moment when Pete Willis and Steve Clark finally nailed that middle harmony section of Emerald, when Elliott realized that Def Leppard might actually make it as a real band, and they were not just some kids copying their heroes. And you can of course hear that Thin Lizzy influence all over Def Leppard's debut album On Through the Night from 1980, with tracks like It Don't Matter or the opening of Lady Strange being built on the same kind of twin guitar language that Thin Lizzy helped define in rock, and Judas Priest later on perfected, polished, and brought into heavy metal. Oh yeah! And as pretty much every fan knows, Def Leppard even recorded their own Thin Lizzy cover decades later, Don't Believe a Word, which appeared on their 2005 covers album Yeah. So yeah, the admiration was always there, which actually makes that next part rather awkward. Because in a strange twist, Def Leppard were actually responsible for a reason why Thin Lizzy decided to call it quits in 1983. And that reason had its name: Pyromania. Released in 1983, Pyromania was Def Leppard's true breakthrough. Number 2 on the Billboard 200, 10 times platinum in the United States, and singles like Photograph and Rock of Ages topping the mainstream rock charts all around the world. It was the album which turned Def Leppard from an up-and-coming British band to worldwide phenomenon. And according to some people who were actually there, that success actually hit Phil Lynott at exactly the wrong moment. As Def Leppard guitarist and fellow Irishman Vivian Campbell recalled, around the time when Pyromania became a worldwide sensation, he actually had a chance to meet Phil Lynott in London in a small club called Frank's Funny Farm. And of course, Viv already knew Phil from before. His band Sweet Savage had opened for Thin Lizzy a couple of times, so it wasn't really a random encounter. But as Campbell later on recalled, Phil was clearly despondent that night. And during their conversation, Lynott himself actually brought up Pyromania. And according to Viv, Phil told him that the album was so good and so perfectly tuned to the new era of rock and roll that he no longer felt Thin Lizzy had a place in that landscape. And he was actually thinking about calling it quits that night. Too late. And ironically, those two weren't the only two rock stars at Frank's Funny Farm that night. Elliott was there as well, and he later said that he spotted Phil in the restroom and nervously wanted to go up to him to introduce himself to his hero. But as soon as he had a chance to say, "Hey, I'm Joe from Def Leppard," Phil cut him off and told Elliott that he had already heard their latest studio album Pyromania, and that it was apparently precisely the reason why he decided to call it quits with Thin Lizzy. Which now I'm thinking about might be simply because he met him at a restroom. And years later, of course, the irony deepened even more. Both Vivian Campbell and Joe Elliott would go on to share the stage with Thin Lizzy, long after Phil Lynott had passed, when the remaining members reunited for tribute shows. Viv actually played with the band between 2010 and 2011, shortly before they rebranded as Black Star Riders, and Joe Elliott appeared as guest vocalist during the period as well several times, thus only adding lore to one of the strangest stories in rock and roll history. So, did Pyromania really kill Thin Lizzy? Well, not really. Because let's all be clear, even if that moment with Phil Lynott actually happened, well, it might have been the final cherry on top, and definitely not the only reason why Phil decided to disband Thin Lizzy. By the early 80s, Thin Lizzy were already strong. Albums like Renegade weren't charting like before, and the band was going through constant lineup changes. By the end of 1982, Snow White had left, and even with John Sykes giving the band a heavier sound on Thunder and Lightning, they were already running on fumes. Lynott's health and drug issues were no secret either, and apparently they were affecting both performances and relationships within the band.
They'd come to play the emerald. Without it, they would not leave.
And despite the farewell tour Brandon, on which the band has gone in support of their latest studio output, Thunder and Lightning, released in March of 1983, because of its much bigger success than of its predecessor, and it finally reaching top 4 in the UK charts once again, some members actually didn't want to call it quits. But between exhaustion, creative tension, and Phil's personal spiral, it was already unraveling. So no, Thin Lizzy did not end because of Pyromania. But it might be true that they ended because, on some level, they felt like they weren't really relevant anymore. And here is where it comes to the biggest irony of all. Because even today, 40 years later, some of the biggest metal bands in history, including Iron Maiden, Metallica, Megadeth, and gazillion others, actually keep citing Thin Lizzy as one of the biggest influences on them personally and on their creative journey. And the craziest thing is that by the early 80s, Thin Lizzy didn't even have to be relevant anymore, because they already were foundational. And who knows how the history would have turned if that decision would not have been made 43 years ago. Oh, and by the way, guys, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Thin Lizzy's influence on heavy metal. I mean, we could make several episodes on their influence on Iron Maiden by themselves. So please let me know in the comments whether you would like me to release a special episode on how Thin Lizzy influenced some of your personal favorite heavy metal bands. Because the truth is that I would simply love to make one. But for now, let's all remember one of the greatest musicians in rock and roll history, the legendary Phil Lynott, who sadly passed away 40 years ago. And thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!